press isn't picking up on it. There's a couple of congressmen who are starting to pick up on this, which is a whole other story. But there's something ethically problematic with using self-interest alone as the only basis for this problem. So if climate change is an ethical issue, you have to admit that you not only have, not that you don't have economic interests, but you also have duties, responsibilities, and obligations. If this were true, the press would ask the senator from Pennsylvania the next time he or she stands up and says, I'm not going to support this because of jobs in Pennsylvania, which is a relevant consideration. But someone should be saying, Mr. Senator or Miss Senator, are you denying that you have no duties and responsibilities and obligations to the people in Africa or the small island developing states or in Asia that are affected? Do you deny that you have responsibility? The other kind of argument is made is there's not enough science here to know that whether we have duty to act. There is an enormous amount of science that is not in question. At best, this is a question of what you do in the face of uncertainty. There is some uncertainty about timing and magnitude. There's something that might be called negative feedbacks that we don't fully understand, that most scientists will admit that we don't fully understand them. But we know a lot. We know a whole lot. And the consensus view is that the impacts will be within an upper and lower bound range, and even the lower bound range is very scary proposition for some people. In fact, you can see the harm today. You don't have to wait for 100 years to see what we've already done in those places, and we don't have to wait 50 years to see what the additional emissions that we will, the harm that will be created if we continue to emit at these levels. So, it's practically important to raise the moral issues. It's practically important to engage in a conversation of what morality requires us to do. And one of the reasons for that is there are options. There are some disagreements about what ethics requires for some of these issues. One of the issues about which ethics disagrees is how do we allocate responsibility for nations given differences in historical emissions levels. It's actually a pretty thorny ethical issue. But spotting the ethical issues will help knock out of contention positions that people are taking that no ethical system would, in fact, condone. Now, all of I've talked about so far are why we've got to understand this as an ethical or moral issue. Now I'm going to talk about the issues. And there are dozens of them. And they're all civilization-challenging ethical questions. The first question is, what is the stabilization level in the atmosphere? At what level should the international community agree to try to limit the greenhouse gases that get in the atmosphere to a level? What is the stabilization level? Another way of saying that, should we aim for 450 parts per million of carbon dioxide, 550 parts per million, 650 parts per million? No national strategy, no personal responsibility makes any sense unless it's understood to be implicitly a position on the stabilization level. Okay, so if the United States were, there was legislation last year in which Congress said the U.S. would reduce its emissions by 17% below 2005 levels, which is actually the weakest of any developed country in the world, and that was under the Obama administration. That position makes no sense. It makes no sense unless it's understood to be implicitly a position on the stabilization level. The greenhouse gas stabilization level will determine the amount of warming that is experienced. The amount of warming will determine the magnitude of the values. You can't make any sense of policy unless you see it as implicitly a position on the stabilization level. Yet we're not talking about, there's no discussion of the U.S. position in regard to the stabilization level. The stabilization level will literally determine what countries live or die, what animals survive, what ocean level rise will be. If that's not a moral issue, I don't know what a moral